So it's exactly 7 o'clock, and I'd like to welcome you to Rooted in Pride, an exclusive preview of Claire Beerjeraz's new show, Rooted. I'm Gosling, Artistic Director of Together 2012 CIC, and we're hosting this event in celebration of LGBTQI+ Pride Month. I'm a white woman with pale olive skin and green eyes behind black plastic glasses. I'm wearing a purple trilby over hennaed cropped hair, a purple and yellow short-sleeved shirt, silver-coloured jewellery, and a rainbow watch strap. As usual, we have British Sign Language interpretation available this evening from Susie Evans and live captions from Norma McKay. Use the captions button at the bottom of the Zoom screen, or if you prefer to see a transcript, the link is in the chat. Now, I'm delighted to introduce Claire, who's just going to give us a bit of audio description.
Hi everyone, my name is Claire Beerjeraz. I am a Black, mixed heritage, gender fluid person. I have half of my hair up, which is black and blonde. I'm also wearing a t-shirt that is khaki green and white, and there is text on the front of my chest on the t-shirt that says Star Girl on it. I'm also wearing black hoop earrings as well.
Thank you, Claire. Claire has filmed an excerpt of the show, which we'll see first, and then she's going to talk with me about the work. Please do use the chat window, and as I see you already doing, the emoticons, whatever it's called these days. Sorry, I'm feeling my age tonight. And yeah, give us feedback, ask questions. If it's easier to use the Q&A box, use that. If it's easier to use the chat, use that, whatever is most straightforward. Please note this film contains adult language, discussions of racism and xenophobia, and a depiction of mental health difficulties. If you're feeling a little bit fragile or you want to stop at any point, the film is about 22 minutes long, so if it gets too much, please do come back and join us for the Q&A. Now, if you'll just bear with me, I'm going to start the film.
Close your eyes, tap your heels together 3 times, and think to yourself, there's no place like home. There's no place like home. There's no place like home. There's no place like home.
There's no place like home. There's no place like home. Fuck off. I'm being so for real. What, there's no place like home? I'm just so sick and tired of how home gets portrayed to us. Because Dorothy, she gets to run around and fuck about in Oz, click her heels together 3 times, asking to go back home, and well, she knows exactly where she'll end up. Me, however, I have been home and then not home, rooted and then rootless, and I'm only 26. When you think of home, who or what comes to mind? Because to me, home is Liverpool, London, Africa, friends, family, my girlfriend, and our cat and our dog. But those things can all change in closeness and meaning without any warning. See, when I first moved to Liverpool, I hated it. I felt repelled by the city. London was my home. See, London would never say, hey, where you from, the way you actually from, or hey, where do you think you're going? Or you don't fucking ignore me. You know what? It's all right, because you're a fucking ugly black bitch. See, I had never felt so ostracized before. So marginalized. I didn't realize how much I needed to be back home, but coming back home comes at a cost. And well, that cost is living with parents. Claire, what do you mean you're going out? It's 6 p.m. All right, well, if you are going out, make sure you lay yourself up. Claire, is that's all you're wearing? Honestly, cover up. No, you can't be leaving the house looking like that. Your hair. Claire, when you leave this home, you represent our family, okay? And look, you've got something on your cheek. Let me get that for you. You just... I don't even know why you're here, actually. No, no, because if you loved me, you wouldn't go out. But you don't. So go on, go. No, because I work every single day, 9 to 5, and I don't get thank you. I do so much for you. You don't even know anything about my life. I don't recognize you. No, you're not my daughter. I hate you. Mum's eh? Look, when you've got one parent who's busy working all the time and another parent who struggles with their mental health, you don't really feel like there's a safe space for you. See, I had dreamt of a home where I could walk down the streets and see people who looked just like me. And then I deemed it. Well, home wasn't nearly as safe for me when I stepped through those doors. So I couldn't find home in Liverpool or London. In the end, I picked Liverpool. I picked being hated by a random passerby than my own mom. So. But hey, not trying to cause a pity party or anything. I mean, something worked out because I am here after all. And, at least I had choice. Not everyone gets that. See, my dad, he called our house la terre de beaucoup. It means land of plenty in Creole. He's not from here, and by that I mean, well, born in Africa, British passport to name, because of that thing you was all really awkward about colonization. But my granddad was the first to migrate from the island of Mauritius to the island of Great Britain. He worked as a tailor, sending money home, so the family were reunited just in time for Christmas. Sandy white beaches became white crisp snow, and my dad was met by the moon instead of the sun. My dad was fluent in his mother tongue. He didn't know a single word of English. And so when the kids would call him the N-word, yeah, he wouldn't have a clue. He told me that winter was one of the harshest, and I don't think it was because of the change in humidity. He changed his name, Renaud to Louis. And same for his brothers, Clément to Philip, Jean Hermain to John, Well, I don't blame him exactly. Well, how else do you try and fit in when you stand out just by existing? By breathing. My dad used to tell me memories of his childhood. I noticed they were always from Mauritius, not England. But I could always picture it so clearly. The youth of my father running along sandy, dusty roads, chewing on sugarcane, fishing in the waters of our ancestors. I know he didn't want to leave, but he didn't have a choice. It was like his parents' way of trying to create a better life for him. And I guess indirectly me. So he just sat in this house, home that felt uncomfortable and didn't quite fit, in the hopes that it would fit me perfectly and give me everything that I ever need. C'est la terre de beaucoup. Look, I am still so grateful for everything that my parents have sacrificed for me to be here. But I don't know, I've always struggled to fit in. I realise now as an adult it's because I'm very clearly neurodivergent, which should have been easy to assess because I was selective mute as a kid. But anyways, as I was saying, when I first moved up to Liverpool, I hated it. And oh, okay, I can see some of you are getting a little bit tense, getting your backs up a little bit. Yes, I am going to be talking about hating Liverpool and North a little bit more. But I promise you it does get good because I did fall in love with the place. And I know what you're thinking. Maybe you want to ask or say aloud, like, oh, Claire, how did you fall in love with this place? Claire, how did you fall in love with this place? Oh my God! Thank you. Yeah, well, as soon as you asked, I will give you the answer. Well, look, I realised that I could never truly escape my experience of racism. That was in Liverpool or London. I guess what made it more difficult was in Liverpool, I was by myself. Look, I was 18, I had no friends, no family. All I was doing was going to lectures, studying, or working. So decided to join some societies. I started off with the LGBTQ plus society. Twas interesting, and what I mean by interesting was I was a Black working class student studying at one of the most anti-Black, middle class, invested institutions in the city. I'm not going to name names, but it's given Russell Group kind of energy. But regardless, it still gave me this sense of community and confidence. I used some of that confidence to join other societies. One very directly named the Mental Health Society. Now, the Mental Health Society was for everyone because we all have mental health, but it ended up being a place where, well, mostly everyone who struggled with their mental health would be. So naturally, I jumped at the opportunity to join because. And oh, no, we didn't just gather and have men TVs, by the way. Well, we actually did loads of cool events around well-being. Like, like yoga and mindfulness and I don't know, just all that shit I didn't give a fuck about. But I don't know, it really helped me to feel part of something. Aiden, Nadia, Sarah, and I, we all study psychology, so we're bonding together even more closely. We started to form a friendship group and hang outside of sessions. We were like vibing, doing bits, like really being there for each other, supporting each other, building a real strong foundation. And I guess you could say, I found home. Ta-da! Well, Aiden and I, we were the closest. We were like siblings, except the only things we'd argue about is who should have been in the bottom two of RuPaul's Drag Race and why Netflix funded a Tall Girl 2. He always encouraged me to stand out, be proud of who I was. And his support was like the Lulu levels. Aiden, thinking about shaving my head, thoughts, feelings. Well, I'm definitely not going to do it now. What? What do you mean? Why would I want to give RuPaul vibes? Oh. Should I go on this date with this girl or not? Because she's kind of giving fuckboy energy, and she has also ghosted me 3 times this year. Period. You know what? It is hot girl summer. I will let you know how it goes. Hey, so I'm thinking for tonight, what should I wear? Jeans and a nice top or dress? What, what do you mean? Oh, look, Delulu or not, it really started to have a positive impact on my well-being, and even my friends from London began to notice. So plans for Drama Sock. Gonna audition for Our Day Out, but I have to do a Scouse accent. No, I know. What do you mean you want to hear it? No, you don't want to hear it. No, Sue, because it's like bad. No, as in like. So I did a Scouse accent earlier, and the audience, they couldn't laugh because I was being racist to myself. No, I know it was like borderline offensive. All right, well, promise you won't laugh. Okay, fine. All right, just hang on. Yeah, you ready? I'm the boss of the boss, mate. Sue, you said you wanted to fucking laugh. Yeah, all right, well, practice makes perfect. Anyway, how's things down south? Sue then began to tell me about how her housemates were stealing her milk. Oh, no, but honestly, this is why house shares with strangers are not the vibe. Because next thing you know, they will be stealing your seasoning. Sue then reminded me no one studying at Oxford Uni was seasoning their food. No, you are so right for that. No, but we keep that salt and pepper close because they will definitely be stealing that. Anyway, what are your lectures like? Sue and I began to have a proper good catch up, just like scrolling on our phones. Well, that wasn't until I saw the news. Sue, can I call you back, please? Yeah, it's my friend Aiden. He's he's dead. What the fuck has happened? Why have I had to find out through a Facebook post? Because I thought he was getting better. I don't understand. What was the last thing you messaged me? Did I miss a cry for help? What about Sarah and Nadia? Did reaction. Of course, they weren't all right. Sarah, she found Aiden, so she just wanted to be by herself. And the loss sparked a manic episode in Nadia, so she was hospitalized. Me, I just wanted to be there for everyone, you know. I wanted us to go back to healing and grow and build on our house. I just wanted us to go back and be the way it was, like the four, I mean, the three of us, and we could just all go. You know, not even time could do that. I lost my friend, and I lost my home, and I carry so much guilt for it every single day of my life. I don't I don't talk about him much. But the people in my life, they didn't know him. You know, it can be so hard when I talk about a home that isn't there anymore. A home that doesn't exist. But you know what they say, right? We move, whatever. And you know, despite all of that loss and trauma, I really fell in love with this place. Well, I found friends and chosen family. I found queer community. I found the love of my life. I found my voice. I found home. And for the first time in my life, God, I feel so safe.
Well, can we cancel our dinner plans? I'm not feeling safe to head towards town.
Hi, Claire. Just wanted to message you in light of the awful events happening in the UK right now. Let me know if there's anything I can do.
You know what happens to our life? Fucking awful.
Thank you, Claire. That was great. We've had a number of comments in the chat already. They're charging down, but B Jones says there was a tall girl too. Angus says great description of your journey. Renee says, wow, that was very powerful, Claire. Wishing you success with the full show. Angus says, so glad you've come out the other side, hopefully. B Jones says, huge round of applause, Claire. Heart was in my mouth for the last chunk of that. And there's more coming in. So, like I say, if you've got questions for Claire, you can either use the Q&A box or put it into the chat. In the Q&A, there's a lovely question from Renee Wallen, which I think will get us into this nicely. I saw on your website that you're planning to publish a poetry book. That's awesome. I'm wondering whether there's a certain time of day or night when you feel most inspired to write.
Oh, great question. Often I am someone who is quite nocturnal. I enjoy sitting in an evening and writing during an evening or dusk. So that's often when you'll find me writing poetry and maybe publishing that poetry book real soon.
Well, we certainly want to hear more about that. Margaret's put in the chat, loved it, fantastic mood. Congratulations on a funny but emotional journey. Brilliant. Renee says, thanks for that, Claire. Looking forward to reading your work. So just clicking around here. So I wanted to ask you, Claire, what are the key messages underpinning Rooted?
Yeah. For me, there are some core themes around home, safety, and belonging, but also how the meanings and concepts of these things can shift and change. The main key message, aside from that, is also encouraging audiences to reflect on their responsibility and influences on things like safety, belonging, and home in the spaces and the people around us as well.
I was thinking when I watched it again, it's such a relevant show to Together 2012 CIC. We produce work from home to be received at home. So we've got home-based artists, home-based audiences, but we've also this year launched a vision statement, Home is where the art is. And again, it's trying to look at that sort of sense of, well, what is home? You know, many of us are in situations that are perhaps not very stable or secure. People are having to move homes, lose homes, you know, which is something you really talk about. And that idea of home being something that's inside us, and it's not bricks and mortar, and it's not a particular place, and it's not necessarily even other people. It's about this thing inside that's so linked to our creativity. And what are your plans for the future of the show?
So my plans are to develop it into a 60-minute full-length show. And I want to sort of delve more into some of the themes from my lived experience as well. So I want to explore my relationship to seeing the body as home and exploring that for my disabilities, but also exploring elements of language. One thing that I really want to explore is how assimilation within my family has sort of directed my name that I've been given, and how we talk about things, and sort of elements of that, and also exploring elements of culture, and that phrase that I've often heard and been told, which is go back home, and what that actually means. What would that look like if I was to track my roots back to Africa and go back home? Would that feel like home for me? So unpacking sort of aspects of that, and yeah, that's my goal for it at the moment.
Yeah, and again, I think, you know, incredibly relevant topics, and particularly relevant in an East London context, and also, I presume, in a Liverpool context. Could you tell me a bit about the whole journey of the, you know, when did you come up with the idea? Because I think lots of us look at one person shows and we're not really sure how they happen. You know, you see the end product, or in this case, a sort of work in progress. But how did it start?
So it started quite a few years ago. I had been given it was the year of writing in Liverpool, and I just started to explore the idea of being a creative. And I was given a commission as a young person to write a piece. And I wrote a 10-minute piece of poetry and soundscape called The Perfect Song, which talked about safety and nightlife, particularly for Black women. And I felt really drawn to the piece, and I really wanted to turn it into a full-length play. But I had no idea how to write for theatre. Poetry and spoken word was my original core as a writer. So I joined the Liverpool Young Everyman Playhouse Writers Programme, where I then learned how to gain skills in writing for theatre. And it was through that I sort of continued to explore this poetry piece called The Perfect Song. And then I started to connect more with a wider sense of it. So yes, safety and shore night, but also what about belonging and home? And I guess what prompted me to really drive and explore the themes of Rooted was particularly last summer with the race riots that took place in Liverpool. I was sort of in temporary accommodation. I was living alone, and I didn't feel like Liverpool was a safe space for me anymore. And it reminded me how quickly all of those elements can really be taken away from an individual. And so it really motivated me to sort of revisit that and use those skills that I learned from the YAP program to write the piece. But as most people might resonate who have ADHD, I began to write in chunks, and I saw an opportunity in Liverpool at the Unity Theatre called Up Next Festival, where they give opportunities to platform new and emerging work. And I had been given a 15-minute slot, which meant I had to write something that could be performed. And as a result, I did. And I got to develop it, and I got loads of positive feedback. And I got to then use that feedback to apply for an opportunity to share that 15-minute excerpt at the Duke's Lancaster as well. So I sort of developed. It's been one of those things where it's been an ongoing process for many years, and I'm so glad that it feels like it's come at the right time for me, for people to receive as well.
Right. B. Jones says, how have you found writing and then performing such personal work? And what have you found helps protect yourself through the process? And Douglas has actually asked a sort of supplementary question, really, to that, although it's a separate question, which is, how did you look after your mental health when writing and producing such an emotionally rich piece of work?
Mm. So the writing process for me was really therapeutic, actually. Being able to make sense of a lot of lived experience that I hadn't necessarily addressed before, and to do it in a way that felt comfortable and boundaried for me. So writing it in the form of theatre. And in terms of performing it, it's been really interesting because performing it in different spaces, you get different responses. It can feel really challenging as a performer and as the writer of the work. You feel very vulnerable, sharing out your lived experience. And if you feel like an audience isn't holding you back, that can be quite triggering in many ways. But what I've found to help me with that process is, again, like re-exploring what boundaries are helpful for me as a writer and a performer. So one of the things I'm looking about developing the show is, okay, am I going to offer myself character names and sort of provide more distance between that as I'm writing it, and therefore exploring how I embody it as a performer as well. So I found that's helpful, and also taking things and working with my own capacity and my own energy levels for performance and for writing of it, and not putting any pressure on myself to feel like I have to get something done by a certain point within, like, it needs to be perfect. So that's also helped me. And in terms of mental health and sort of producing, as Douglas has described, an emotionally rich piece of work. I have trained as a creative arts therapist, and so I'm very fortunate in the sense that I have a wealth of tools to support me, and have a understanding of what helps me when it comes to supporting my mental health. So for me, it might be journaling, or again, whatever I'm coming up with feeling wise, I will often write into a form of poetry. And that's not work that is to be shared, but more for processing. And also speaking with the creative team around me and the people who've been supporting me with the work has really helped me when I have felt dips in my mental health around the themes and the content of that experience as well.
And Nina asks, when you're performing, what do you do to ground yourself if you're triggered during a performance?
Yeah, that's a great question. And funnily enough, I have had a performance of Rooted where I have felt sort of felt like I was losing myself in the performance itself. And what is really helpful is trying to bring myself in the back in the room through grounding. So because I use lighting and sound to support me in storytelling and keeping myself into the rhythm of where the story is going, sometimes I will sort of draw my mind to those sorts of feelings. What does the light feel like on my face, and what is the temperature of that? Or I have a rug that I use in this set. And that's really great because it gives me a texture that I can feel on my feet. I don't wear shoes, so I can feel the texture of the carpet. And it's elements like that that help keep me grounded throughout a performance. And obviously, for people, they might explore different elements, but for me, those things really help me when I feel lost and overwhelmed in a piece.
And did you come up with those strategies yourself, or are they strategies that you've learnt from other people?
Yeah, so they're strategies I've sort of developed myself, but it's been an ongoing process. So it's often something that I have worked when I've been well-being practitioner on projects. It's something that I often offer to other artists. And then it's now come for me to be a lead artist on a project, and I've then been trying out different things. And so it was about sort of taking time to reflect before I got into the process to have an understanding of what might work. And then during rehearsals, trying out some of those things. And it was only sort of after the second performance I'd done of Rooted where I realized, oh my God, this carpet and this rug is really, really helpful for me actually, because when I'm sort of sat down and telling these pieces, I can stim with my feet and I can feel the material, and it's really helpful.
Yeah, I've never, yeah, I mean, I just think it's great techniques. So Julie says, great show, Claire, thank you. How much dialogue do you ideally want with your audience? It seems as if you're writing from your heart, and I think the questions you're asking us all are very pertinent, and as Ju says, very topical. What shape would you like to see the dialogue taking?
Yeah, I see the piece sort of being a conversation, almost like I am telling a story. Again, like jumping in and out of experiences. It is almost like I see the set as like my mind, this character's mind, and like this these elements of home that have sort of sprinkled across the set, and therefore I'm sort of giving a stream of consciousness to the audience. And yeah, it's almost like the audience members are my friends, which is why there are elements where I'm directly talking to audience or interacting with them. But there are also some moments where they are just sort of viewers as well, and there is distance to that. So yeah, that's kind of how I see it taking place, and yeah, essentially just monologuing.
Yes, but I think Judy's right. You know, you've got a very active audience, and the audience quite know what we're going to do next. So that keeps us on our toes as well. Angus says, so true that finding your voice can help to soothe anxieties and traumatic memories. Douglas says, how did you manage to balance the pride and shame in your writing to make it so real and uplifting but unfiltered? And how has it felt hearing other people's interpretation of your work?
Mm. So I would say with my writing process, I find myself, especially when I'm sort of going through lived experience and revisiting things that can be quite traumatic, I find myself in quite writing a lot of the aspects of that might bring up shame. And it's for me, it's about what I was referencing before about working to my own capacity. So it's about being like, okay, in this writing session, I'm giving myself maybe an hour to write, and I'm just going to write this stream of consciousness of what comes out. And then it's about revisiting it again and sort of coming in with the appropriate intention that I need for myself. I think ultimately also what helps with trying to manage the balance in writing something that is, like you say, quite real, very, very raw, but ultimately still uplifting in many ways, is because for me, one of the pillars of my work is like, yes, I would like to activate people in when they engage with my work, but I also want to create a discourse, and that could be an internal discourse, but that could be a discourse between me and the audience, and also positive action, because I consider myself an artivist, someone who combines activism with my creative mediums. And so for me, what's really helpful with maintaining those pillars as an artist is saying, okay, I'm going to tell you all of this, but I'm also going to shed some light of what can happen and what can take place. And that's been really helpful for me in reminding myself what's really important for me as a writer. In terms of hearing others' interpretations of my work, it's been really helpful. It's been really, really helpful to see how people interpret these themes, because there are some elements and some use of language that are very specific and that maybe some people might resonate with more. But there are also some themes where people might resonate with it in a very different way, or might take from it in a different way. And for me, that's okay. And I always encourage people to engage with the work in a way that is suitable and appropriate for them. So for me, yeah, it's always been really helpful, and I found, especially with the work, because it specifically talks about Liverpool, in some areas of it, and London as well. It's been helpful to get that feedback on interpretation, because one thing I'd like to do, and I'm learning to develop as a writer, is scaling up my work. How can I maintain these core elements and these core themes, but be able to take it, for example, like when I went to the Dukes in Lancaster. And so that's really helpful, because getting interpretations of that, I'm like, okay, I can change the language here, and how can I scale it up, whilst also being true to my core.
Something that I was very interested in is the fact that this is very much a one-person show. You don't have a director credit. Have you worked with directors at all? And if not, was it a conscious decision not to work with a director, or was it a funding issue?
Yeah, so the original piece, I directed myself. Again, it was just quite fortunate that I work as a director within theatre and film. But again, that was to do with funding. I think that it is really helpful, especially when writing from lived experience, that you aren't taking the full capacity of a one-person creative team. And I think there is joy and a lot to gain from working with multiple creatives and having visions and perspectives and understandings, and it can really strengthen a piece. So yeah, the directing thing is definitely due to funding, and I'm really excited because when I do the show again, I will have a co-director, which means that I can still have some balance and choice in the story, because it is so close to home and I would like that autonomy. But I can mostly give the reins away to a co-director and say, here we go, I'm just a performer in this instance.
Well, maybe I wouldn't go quite that far, given that you're also the writer. I have to say that the lack of a second director, if you like, was not just didn't it there was no impact, and that was what really fascinated me, that this was like a show where you developed with a separate director, but I knew you hadn't. And I found that very, very interesting, because I mean, things like, I was very interested in the way you kept varying the height of the performance, and I thought that was really powerful, even, even on a sort of long shot of a stage on a screen share on Zoom, it was still really powerful, where you were standing up on the box, you were down on the rug, you were moving around, but that height, and that's much more of a director thing than a writer and performer thing. Did you do specific work around the movement?
Yeah, so once I had written it, and once I had sort of gotten an understanding of the lines, and I'd had learned it to some extent, I then just played with it in a space, and explored what felt natural to me movement wise. And then I revisited it again, and explored again, what would be helpful for me in terms of like structure and separation. So again, using the movement to support me with pacing of where I'm up to with my storytelling as well. So some of that movement is also supporting me with my access as well in telling the story. What was helpful is that at a point in developing this piece, I also had sort of a couple of people come in to observe the piece as well to see what it was like from that side, because obviously I'm not actually ever seeing it from an audience perspective if I'm directing it myself and performing it myself. So again, that was also helpful to see what it was like to actually have people in the audience and see what that looks like. I think part of the movement as well, not just accessibility and helping me keep track and pace everything, but also being someone who is neurodivergent, moving about in space is really helpful. And for me, it's another way of sharing a character's trait without actually naming it as well. So that was really helpful for me to do that. And the same with jumping between time, jumping into memories, and then jumping into talking directly to the audience. It is very much so written as a character who's neurodivergent and saying, I'm going to tell you this, but then actually going somewhere else and vice versa.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I could be described and would describe myself as neurodivergent too, but to me, it didn't come across as it was about, oh, this person's really dynamic. This is a dynamic,
Yeah.
energetic, exciting, kind of changing performance. It wasn't about, it didn't come across to me about access requirements or, oh, this is a particular trait. I just thought, wow, this really grabs the attention because it's moving.
Mhm.
There's no danger of it becoming dull and losing attention because things are moving on again. And I think pace is so important. So there's a question from Renee who says, how do you fit in your therapy work around your creative work? And is it hard to balance the two roles?
Yeah, it definitely can be difficult at times. Um, because I am a freelancer now, I have a little bit more autonomy with what that looks like and what that balance is for myself. But for quite a large portion of my work as a therapist, I found myself mostly doing that, and I found it really difficult to create and carve out time for myself as a writer and to develop my own artistry. So it was one of those where I decided to make that big jump into freelancing full time, and it was through that I was able to carve out and dedicate and commit specific days of the week, or moving that if I was to take on a project as well. So yeah, it definitely was hard at a point, but I'm definitely learning to find the balance between the two.
I won't ask if there's a balance between the incomes because I think we all know the answers to that one.
hmm
What are your hopes for the future of Rooted? I know you've talked about it becoming a 60-minute show, but where would you like it to go? Would you like it also to be on television?
hmm So, so because I've received sort of Arts Council England funding for the show, I'll be performing it again in October for that 60-minute show that I was talking about. But my hope is to also explore doing a tour of the piece, initially in the Northwest, so that I can sort of explore the development of scaling that work up of what I was talking about. But another core element of what I wanted to pair with the show was developing a workshop series that ties in with the tour, so that I can work with local community members and curate a curtain raiser performance for the show as well, so that I am able to sort of spend time in an area that I might be touring in, and work with local community members, to give them a platform to talk about their own themes as well. And that's something that I'm already working on. Similarly, in October, I'll be doing a series of workshops to create a zine that will be launched on the day of my performance. But I'd love to actually work with community groups and get them performing as well.
I think that's a brilliant idea, and I can see you going all over the country and beyond because, you know, in one way it's a very, very personal show, but like all of the best personal shows, it speaks to all of us, and it has themes that I think are really universal. So yes, I mean, I'm sure it will tour. It certainly should tour. Just, just checking. There's another. So Nina says, I could really identify with the concept of playing around with yourself in the third person role by directing, playing with your character names as a form of masking, etc., as ADHD informed behaviours in your performance. And I love that your neurodivergence is written into it in multiple ways. And again, I think that's a really good point. So often people think about kind of disability art or art about disability as being kind of very singularly focused, and of course we know that that's not true. But I think in this particular case, yes, here is Claire the writer, here is Claire the director, the lighting designer, the movement designer, the workshop leader, and that's just to name a few.
Yeah.
So are you working on anything else at the moment?
Yes, I am. I have written a short film titled Wings that explores the impacts of mental health, religion, and culture on lesbian identity and connection. So that should be greenlit pretty soon, and I should be filming that within the next year or so. Um, and then I'm also sort of a queer core member for Homotopia Festival, which means that I'll be exhibiting as a visual artist for the festival in November. And for that, I will be exploring how we can rest as a form of resistance. And I will be reclaiming some of the core types of rest, like social rest, spiritual rest, mental, physical rest, and curating a well-being space for the festival for that as well. And then just continuing to facilitate workshops, direct shows, and all of that stuff.
I love the idea of rest as a form of resistance, because I think so many of us as disabled people have to rest more than we'd really like to. So the idea that that's actually passive resistance, I think is, yes, I can see in terms of reactions, kind of hearts and applause coming up at the thought of that. Do you want to just tell us a bit more about resting as resistance, because it's a very popular subject?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, I found, especially when you come from marginalized identities, that there is this expectation to constantly fight and speak and do a lot for your community. And I find that there is also this underlying expectation that is applied to you, which can cause a lot of burnout. And especially when you're disabled already, and you might have sort of energy limiting sort of embodiments, it can be a lot. And so for me, I have researched how a lack of rest can create different elements of trauma in the body and in the system. And that a way of unlearning that is by actively sort of engaging in forms of rest. And what it does essentially is it gets rid of this underlying understanding within our society that there is a direct correlation between value and labor. And it's essentially a decolonization practice that again explores about empowering self to rest. Yeah, so I'm really excited to continue exploring and researching it. And it's really interesting because it's something as a therapist that I would speak with clients who want to engage in sort of sleep hygiene sessions, and I often talk about these types of rest. But it's actually really nice to think about that for myself as an artist and a marginalized artist, and to provide spaces for individuals to just fill their cup up, and just sit and not think about how many quote unquote spoons they have to give, and will collect some for themselves.
Yes, Julie says it's very true that activism demands a massive amount of energy. And Douglas says, I will be a member of the resistance, which I think is a great word, Douglas. And yes, I think we can all agree with that. I'm very interested at the idea, well, at the truth that decolonization is also something that is relevant to disabled people from whatever background and whatever culture. And I think that's something that's perhaps become more aware. I've become more aware of in the last few weeks because I've seen various shows by disabled artists who've also looked at colonialism. But I wondered if you'd got anything more that you would, what can we all as disabled people learn from learning about decolonization? How can we empower ourselves?
Mm. And I think with that question as well, like obviously there will always be nuance to that and different ways of observing that and engaging with decolonization of practice and of work. But I think for me, whenever I look at aspects of that, it always comes back to sort of two core elements, which is sort of discourse and also education. I think having informed sort of basically having informed discussions and having information backing those actions and those behaviors that you see, I think is really, really helpful. But also creating space, like for myself, even having some intersecting marginalizing identities, it's really important for me as part of a decolonization practice that I am still platforming and advocating and creating spaces for experiences of other people as well, and understanding those differences, and therefore understanding that with those differences comes an adaptation of language and approach as well, and that all stems from that discourse and that conversation, but also that education around it as well. So that's the best thing I would say for individuals.
Thank you. Well, Margaret says, I was inspired. Thank you, Claire. Loved it. Look forward for more. Yes, so do I. Fantastic and powerful storytelling. Renee says, sounds like it's been an incredible journey for you. Thank you so much for sharing it with us in such a beautifully constructed way. You're very inspirational. And we mean that in the most positive way and not in that kind of inspiration porn way. But absolutely. Well, there's possibly time for one very, very quick question or point, but I think I'll say to you, Claire, is there anything else you'd like to say to us?
Well, I guess I just wanted to say thank you to everyone. Thank you for the support. Thank you for the platform. Thank you for those who are engaging with my work. And I'm just really excited to continue developing this and to see where it goes. And I hope that everyone who is watching this and hearing this, perhaps, will connect with me further, and we can sort of see where it happens, where it takes us.
I'm sure we will. I'm very much looking forward to your next performance for us already. So, yes, I'd like to end up with some thank yous as well. So, thanks to our funders, Arts Council England and the National Lottery Community Fund. Thanks to our access workers, Norma McKay from Global Real-Time Captioning, and our British Sign Language interpreter, Susie Evans. Thanks to our production team, Marcy Rick and Ben Rogers, who've organised tonight. Thanks to all of the Together 2012 CIC team who've supported them. And of course, a huge thank you to you, Claire, for sharing your work with us tonight. And to everybody here watching who's been such a brilliant audience. We have a very, very short survey form. So if you're able to fill it in, the link is in the chat, but the link will also come up when the Zoom closes. If you'd like to send any other messages for Claire, I don't think we popped your social details into the chat. Do you want to just tell us where we can find you?
Yeah, you can find me on at Claire Beerjeraz, and my main social is Instagram. I also have a website which is www.clairebeerjeraz.com.
And if you don't remember any of that and you want to send Claire a message, then email us and we will pass it on. So thank you everybody again. And it's been a great evening. As I said at the beginning, it's very, very hot weather at the moment. So I would highly recommend that the next thing you do is have a nice drink of water, which indeed is what I'm going to do, and say a very good evening to everybody.